The world of music is one that is constantly evolving. New genres, new trends, and new artists arrive every decade in a way that can drastically change things for the better, and sometimes for the worse. But we digress. However, sometimes there are artists who change the game in such a way that people are surprised by how they did it, and how they got successful. Daft Punk was absolutely one of those groups. They basically came out of nowhere, did things their way, and became one of the most popular duos in all the world. So allow us to show you Daft Punk, then and now. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Their beginnings. Everyone has to start somewhere, right? Well, it might surprise you exactly where this group found their story beginning. The origins of Daft Punk start in the 8th grade, believe it or not, because it was there that Thomas Bangalter and Guy Manuel de Homem Christo first met. They started making music together in Bangalter's bedroom around 1993. In 1995, they released Da Funk, which married the nascent thump of G-Funk and the bubbling, rubbery sounds of European club music into a smash that sounds as massive and powerful and surprising today as it did then. What does this show? Simple. It shows that even back then, they knew just how grand their own original sound could be. From there, they started making bigger and bigger music. Their first formal album, Homework, was released back in 1997. That was the one with Around the World on it, which remains a perfect song in the eyes of its fans. And also had music videos directed by Spike Jonze, Michel Gondry, and Roman Coppola. Which, if you know those names, you know that they are some top-tier directors helping out some top-tier artists. But this is honestly where much of their path differed from others, because while it's true that they took the typical paths of musicians by doing some tours and talking to the press to highlight themselves when they could, they enjoyed their anonymity above all else. In public appearances, they wore helmets, but even then, they hardly appeared in public at all. This included when they had some of their biggest hits, like with Discovery, and doing a certain movie that we'll talk about later. They just didn't want the attention on them. Setting a tone. This, in many ways, is what made Daft Punk so unique to the world at large. Because if you think of the biggest artists from all genres, from Taylor Swift to Beyonce, to Drake, to Ariana Grande, and so on, they love the attention. They love to go out and represent themselves in all the ways that matter, just so that they can go and bring more attention to themselves, their brand, and so on. But Daft Punk didn't do that. Rather, they went and set a standard and a tone by saying it's not about us, it's about the music. Their careful attention to every aspect of their music, their collaborators, and their appearance, down to their heady Slimane-designed uniforms, spoke to the depths of their creativity and their curiosity, and helped influence a similarly controlling generation of artists that wanted to emulate what they did. And if you really think about it, by going and doing what they did, by focusing more on their music and bringing it to life in the best way possible, rather than focusing on their image and their looks outside of their helmets and suits, they made people listen to their music more. It's fair to say that even today, many don't know Daft Punk, or didn't know how impactful their music was overall. But it's also fair to say that many absolutely knew about them, and respected how they handled themselves. Tours. By the time they were doing their third album via Human After All, people were getting wise to what Daft Punk brought to the table, and even thought that third album wasn't their best in the eyes of critics. It didn't stop them from going and turning things on their heads once again via their tours. For 48 dates across 2006 and 2007, Daft Punk performed the Alive 2006-2007 World Tour, performing a mega mix of their music from a large LED-fronted pyramid. The tour was not just beloved, but many people felt that it was bringing the power of dance music back to the people, which is not something you hear about all the time. But Daft Punk absolutely did it. In fact, the tour was so good that it became its own live album, and with its single Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger, Daft Punk not only re-cemented itself as a great group, but an award-winning one, as they got a Grammy for both the album and the song. They were gaining more and more popularity with everything they did, and they were about to make their biggest leap yet by going to the grid. Tron Legacy. At San Diego Comic-Con back in 2009, it was announced that Daft Punk had composed 24 tracks for the film Tron Legacy. This was a sequel decades in the making, and Disney knew that they had to go big with the soundtrack to make it feel like you were on the grid, and Daft Punk was truly the only option to make that happen. Daft Punk's score was arranged and orchestrated by Joseph Trapanese. The band collaborated with him for 2 years on the score, from pre-production to completion. The score featured an 85-piece orchestra, recorded at Air Lyndhurst Studios in London, which goes to show you just how much Daft Punk cared about the tracks for the film, and how much they wanted them to go and be special from top to bottom. Daft Punk also made a cameo as disc jockey programs, wearing their trademark robot helmets within the film's virtual world, because in that very rare case, their looks actually perfectly fit in with the setting around them. See, they were born for this. The soundtrack album for the film came out in late 2010 after the movie arrived, and an official music video for De-Rezzed also premiered on the MTV networks on the same day the album was released. This video was incredibly special, as it had Tron Legacy star Olivia Wilde as the character Cora in specially shot footage, along with images of Daft Punk in Flynn's arcade, further fusing the music and the visuals of the world together in a way that fans truly enjoyed. The soundtrack was as important as the visuals of the movie, a major leap from the original film. Many fans cited that the music was so good that they couldn't help but get the album when it came out, and some even cite that it's the only movie soundtrack they've bought. Its tracks were so popular that Disney even did a re-release of it in 2011, where they did a remix of the Daft Punk songs. This whole project was no doubt a major highlight of their careers. Continued success. Following Tron Legacy, Daft Punk continued to do their thing, and their reach grew as they did their later albums like Random Access Memories, which had the track Get Lucky, which was indeed lucky for Daft Punk, as it set records for them in both the UK and on Spotify. They also started working more with other artists, including helping make Kanye West's album Yeezus, working with Pharrell, The Weeknd, and more. Many thought they wouldn't end. But retirement. It's always a curious thing when a group announces their retirement. But true to form, Daft Punk did it better than anyone else via a YouTube video they made called Epilogue. The 8-minute clip features the duo, Thomas Bangalter and Guy Manuel de Homem Christo, walking around the desert, wearing their familiar space helmets and leather jackets. After a few moments, one of the members looks at the other, removes his jacket, and reveals an energy pack on the back. The other touches a button on the pack. The first member walks away quickly, and then explodes. The scene cuts to a sunrise, or possibly a sunset, as a choral version of the group's song, Touch, plays. A public statement about them from their manager stated that the group had disbanded, but that they might still work in solo capacity. Legacy. As for what the legacy of Daft Punk is, it's honestly in how they went about their careers. They chose the road less traveled in terms of public appearances, focusing more on certain kinds of tours and making music, and they absolutely succeeded. They lasted for decades and have albums and tracks and appearances that have gone on to be remembered by many. If anything, Daft Punk is an inspiration to those who want to be different in how they go about things, because sometimes being different works. There likely isn't going to be another Daft Punk, and honestly, it'd be hard to try and be them. So what do you think? What do you think of this look at the history of Daft Punk from then to now? Are you still sad that they retired? Do you feel that they still had so much to give to the world? Or do you agree that this was a perfect time to retire? What do you personally think the legacy of Daft Punk will be? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the channel.